Governing Board meeting of the Jefferson Elementary School Board District to order at 7:01 p.m. Ms. Covere, can we get members present, please?
Aaron Rashba.
Here.
Manufo Leah Inga Anuai is absent. Shakil Ali.
Here.
Anthony Sujisaka is not present. Andrea Jordan.
Here. That is a quorum. We will be moving to the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe we have some students here from John F. Kennedy Elementary School. Can you all lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance today? Does someone want to go to the podium? Or you can do it from where you are. If I can get everyone to stand and put your right hand over your heart.
Oh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job. Thank you. We're going to be moving to the approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Before we move to a motion, since trustee Leaiga Anuai is not present today, we will be tabling item 14A, which is her discussion on the CSBA 2022 annual conference. So with that amendment, I will take a motion unless there's any other amendments.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Agenda is approved. So we'll be moving to special presentations. John F. Kennedy Elementary School again, they're going to be presenting on their garden program. Ms. Gabriella Judd will present on the garden curriculum program highlights and activities from the 2022-2023 school year. And we have students here from grade 3 through 5 that will be sharing those experiences and insights with us.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a couple slides prepared for us to take a look at as well. I'm Miss Gabriella, the garden teacher at JFK for the 2022-23 year. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the garden program at JFK. It's through an organization called SEI, which is Strategic Energy and Innovations. And the program that I'm a part of is the Climate Core Education Outside program, which their mission is to advance science education and environmental literacy in public elementary schools by bringing student learning to the outdoor classroom, to spark children's interest in science and connecting them to the natural world through consistent NGSS aligned lessons in schools, school gardens, providing partner schools with a dedicated AmeriCorps fellow, which is me. So this is also funded through, through the government, a governmental organization, AmeriCorps, to serve at every school site for the school year to steward the outdoor classrooms. So there are about 40 other fellows like me all throughout the Bay Area. Another mission is to transform schools into more sustainable communities. Thank you. There we are in our outdoor classroom, sitting on our stumps And this is an area when it's nice outside, we get together and we get to have the speaking portion of our lessons. And then the garden kind of expands from the mural a little further, maybe 40 feet or so to the other side of the garden. And this is the main garden. Next photo, please. Or the next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit on our curriculum. For kinder, we have the 5 senses for Unit 1, which was through the first semester. The second unit is trees, woods, and paper. First grade is plant structures, Unit 1, and function. And for the second semester is animals in their environment. Second grade, life cycles. First semester, second semester, soil and decomposition. Third grade, plant adaptations and animal adaptations. Fourth grade, exploring water, climate change, and clean energy. Fifth grade is also exploring water in the first semester and food and agriculture in the second semester. And special day classes have been doing garden care, hands-on activities in the first semester. Second semester, garden care and plant anatomy here in the second semester. Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted to share some photos of the lessons and the projects that we've been working on. So here we have a lesson on learning animal adaptations and camouflage, where students practiced understanding camouflage by hiding blocks with materials that they use from the garden. Also learning about dissecting lima beans to learn the parts of a seed, and we found this really cool shaped rock that was exactly the same shape as the lima beans that we had just dissected. Next slide, please. This is a project with the kindergartners where we were making seed bombs, is what we called them, to help the bees and to plant flowers in a property that is kind of across JFK Elementary. And so the kindergartners were the ones putting together the seed bombs made of clay, seeds, and compost. And the 5th graders will be the ones to actually plant those flowers across the street to hopefully be able to create more habitat for the pollinators. Next slide, please. Here is a picture of 5th graders, but every single grade got to participate in a celebration of garden love and self-care. And we made root veggie stamps, and we made some love letters to the garden or to ourselves or to whoever we wanted to make those letters to. So just a little bit of ingenuity and celebration with the resources that we have. Here are some 5th graders that are doing some garden work, prepping the soil for spring planting, and exercising community garden care all together. And here are just some more adorable photos. I wish I could share all the photos with all of you, but we have some garden jobs happening. We're creating some habitats and learning about habitats and just sharing some really cool things that we have found in the garden. So that is all that I have to say. So I will pass the mic to whichever student would like to share first.
I am Lorelai Orr. I'm representing room 27. The thing I really love about garden is that it gives you a break from like the troubles of your day and kind of like the outside world, and gives you a safe space where you can just thrive and just have a good time.
My name is Sydney, and I'm from room 21. What I like about the garden is like its own little world where it's peaceful, and if you're like Lorelai said, if you're having a bad day, it just makes you feel happy and calm and peaceful. it's really calm and I enjoy having it because for a long time we didn't.
My name is Yana, and something I like about the garden is their flowers because they're really pretty. And I really like the teacher and the activity she gives us. And I like how peaceful and quiet and nice it is there.
Hi, my name is Jason and I'm representing room 6, and something I like about the garden is we can do things to help nature. Something I like about the garden is just like watering the plants and stuff so that we have like food to survive, right? The thing I like about the garden, um, I like looking at plants.
Does, go ahead.
I'm not a student. The JFK Garden program has been going on for many years. Some of that is because there was a pandemic. And this year has been a really wonderful celebration where we've been able to get back outside before the rains came. And one thing that I will say that is a real constant amongst the garden program from year to year is how much they enjoy the tactile experience and how much that resonates particularly with our special day class population. And it really is a place where if you have a student that's having a real emotionally hard day, whether they be from Gen Ed or SDC, they can find themselves in the garden, and it's a really great place to have some of those peacemaker conversations. And this year, she will not toot her own horn, but for Miss Gabriella, I will. It's been fantastic. She is the third garden instructor that we've had, and the first was fantastic. He laid a lot of high water marks, and the second was really interested in art more than the garden, and she missed her boyfriend at UC Riverside a lot. We heard a lot about that, and it has been wonderful to have a consummate professional who is really so well versed in the plants. I've learned a lot about just the nature around the school from her, and she's really been able to capture the resources of the garden, but then also have a classroom right off the yard that then the students can use when it's been rainy, and it's just been a real pleasure to see. The only bummer about Miss Gabriella is that she is already in the second year of her Climate Corps service, and so we only get her for this year, but it's been really fantastic to have her really re-spark and reinvigorate our garden program after the pandemic. We needed somebody with strong arms to do heavy lifting, and she has done that with aplomb. So thank you to her and to all of our wonderful speakers tonight.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions from board members? And if so, what I would like to do is have each person ask one question each, and then we'll rotate, and if you have more, we'll come back around to you. All right. We'll start on my right.
My question is if any of the students have gotten involved with doing any garden projects at home with houseplants or outside, and if so, do you have any tips for me?
If you're not very good about taking care of the plants, you can actually just get succulents and you only need to water them like once or twice a week and they'll survive. So
Yes. I don't have any questions, just a few comments. First of all, thank you so much for coming here. And you all are blessed that your school is right on the bottom of San Bruno Mountain. So you have access to all that nature right there. It's great to hear that you all are connecting with nature. By being in the garden program, you're promoting healthy living. Hopefully you're talking about eating fruits and vegetables and staying healthy. I liked hearing the students talk about it being a safe space. That's really important in school and outside of school. So there's so much more I could say about it, but thank you so much for highlighting to us the greatness of your program.
All right, I have one question and one comment. Question. I saw pictures of it. Do you all grow as anything edible? And then do you get to eat any of your favorite vegetables?
I mean, some of, like the heart art, it had like was it beet? Oh, yeah, it had beet powder and like carrot stamps. So yeah, pretty much edible.
Thank you. And then my one comment would actually be for either the administrator or possibly even the teacher. Because again, I love seeing garden projects like this. Through the San Mateo County Office of Education, they have the Environmental Literacy Initiative. It's called SMELC. I would look into it because you can actually find a lot of ways to get a lot of grant money. And they also pay you as an administrator or teacher to do it. So, yeah, so I mean, that's something to look into if you want to continue expanding your gardens. One of their huge projects is actually outdoor classrooms and garden projects. So I'd look into that for free money.
Trustee Rashba, did you have any other questions or a comment to conclude?
Just a comment. Thank you for the presentation. You all spoke wonderfully. I'm so glad that we have this program at JFK and at other schools I know through the district. It makes a huge difference, and I really resonated with what the student said, similar to Trustee Ali, of how important it is to be outside, have that outlet, and connect with nature. So thank you very much.
I want to echo my fellow trustees. Thank you all for coming, and especially the students. It takes bravery to stand up here in front of some strangers and speak your truth and tell us about your experiences. I also want to just highlight and honor the garden teacher. I think, you've done an amazing job, obviously, as your principal has said, and it's going to be a loss when we lose you, but we are grateful for the time that we do have. And so I guess my question would actually be to the principal, which is, what are we going to do to ensure that we don't go back to pre-pandemic times once we do lose Ms. Judd?
Continue with our PTA fundraising. PTA this year was great. We got a scholarship. They knocked off dollars off the price of the program, and our PTA fundraising has been such a we can ultimately continue with this in the future. And now that we're able to be back on campus 5 days a week doing good things, this is something that we're going to JFK for the foreseeable future.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Harris. So with that, we actually have some certificates to give out. I'm going to actually have my fellow trustees assist me with this. And then when you hear your name, if you just want to step up, and we will give you a certificate and congratulate you and thank you for being here. And I will start on my left this time.
Okay, certificate of appreciation for Jason Jones.
And I have a certificate of appreciation for participation in the flag ceremony and special presentation for Francis Liana, and I'm going to pronounce the last name probably wrong, so apologies in advance, Mangapuro.
I have a certificate of appreciation for Lorelei Orth.
No. That's fine, whatever you want to do.
Certificate of Appreciation for Sydney or Nia.
And last but not the least, I have a certificate of appreciation for Adam Ramirez.
We did have 6 speakers, but we only got 5 names, but we'll get that certificate over to your school in the next week.
Thank you. Can we get a final round of applause for our presenters? Thanks again. Okay. Moving on to communications, board member acknowledgements and commendations. This time I'm going to start on my left.
Actually, can you come back to me, please?
Sure. Trustee Ali, would you?
I'd just like to once again commend the students and teacher that came to present just now about their wonderful garden program. Also, I want to congratulate again MH Tobias School for receiving the Distinguished School Award from the state of California. And, you know, time goes by so fast, but we haven't had a meeting since we went, okay, so it's appropriate to do it now. A few of us went down to Anaheim to receive the award on behalf of the school and represent our district. So congratulations to MH Tobias School.
I would like to thank Bill Heath for offering an opportunity for me to tour the workforce housing project at MP Brown shortly after our last meeting. And it was fascinating getting to go through a great tour added to by Chad and Sam on the construction team. I learned an awful lot and about many of the challenges, some of which were brought on by the bad weather over the winter break. I see we're in for some more coming up. But really the feeling was just of the progress taking place in that the units are up. To walk through them was really inspiring, to see the community space and just to see what a vibrant place to live that it will be. I kept thinking of how much brain power and talent will be, assembled in that structure, and just what an amazing place it will be to live very, very soon. So I think it's wonderful that our district is creating a place where teachers and staff can live, an affordable place to live that is close to all the schools in our district. And I greatly look forward to that being opened and completed. Thank you.
Okay, so well, first of all, I'd like to echo them and all of the district's accomplishments. I also wanted to give a special shout out to all the schools that are participating in the readathon. I know my fellow trustees and I are going to some school sites and doing some readings. I know mine is coming up on the 13th. And then I'd also like to acknowledge Fernando Rivera for having, they had their library, had a guest speaker recently. It was a local author. Again, I was blanking on his name and I couldn't find the email with his name in it, but thank you for coming to school. I saw the pictures and that was a very well thought out event. And Nancy Zerner, thank you for putting that on for us, Fernando School Librarian.
Thank you. And so I also wanted to echo my fellow board trustees. I actually also attended the recognition for MHT at Anaheim, and it was just truly amazing to see us get honored for what we do on a daily basis as just a part of our district best practices, making sure that we're at the forefront and giving our students the best education that they can. And obviously having MHT be honored for that was just the icing on the cake. I also want to acknowledge the author talk that happened at Fernando Rivera. I actually had a chance to attend. The author's name is Mike Young, and he engaged the students with reading about his books. He also talked about how he became an author. He played the ukulele Ukulele. It was a very interesting song. He also showed pieces of his art, 3D, 4D. It was pretty amazing just to see the students so engaged and passionate about not only, the art and the music, but also just, maybe being a future author. And so it was just so well thought out, well put together. And so definitely shout out to the librarian, Nancy Zerner, for her efforts there. At the end of it, the author gave away some free books. I actually ended up getting one of those books and I donated it back to the library, a signed copy. And so if you are listening and you're at Fernando Rivera, you can actually go into the library and get a copy of that book checked out to read. The other thing I want to mention, it is International Women's Day. And so I'm happy as a woman to honor and promote women's rights in this country. This day, I guess, has been celebrated as far back as 1911. And so if anyone wants to go into the history of International Women's Day, it was, I guess, came about because at the time we were fighting for women's rights to vote. And so back in 1975, the UN actually adopted it, and it's now truly something that is being honored and celebrated across the world. And so I wanted to leave with two quotes from some very important women that I have looked up to. One of them is Coco Chanel, who says a girl should be two things, who and what she wants to be. And so for all the girls or women out there, if anyone has ever told you you can't or you shouldn't, don't believe them, do what you want and when you want. They say that women that don't speak up, women that don't stir things, they're rarely noticed in history. And so you really want to be yourself because that's the best person that you can be. And then the last quote that I wanted to read is from Meghan Markle. When girls are given the right tools to succeed, they can create incredible futures, not only for themselves, but for those around them. And so again, congratulations to all the women out there, moms, mothers, grandmothers, and happy International Women's Day. Now we're going to move on to superintendent comments.
Thank you. So in the course of the last week, we received notification that the Board of Education, State Board of Education, was going to be approving Jefferson Elementary School District as a recipient of a planning grant for community schools. So I wanted to thank Ms. McCulick for helping spearhead that application and thought partnering that Mr. Ali did with her on that as he was supporting another district to apply. So we're excited about that. It's a district-wide grant. We have 2 years to submit some planning grants that are much larger. So we look forward to that opportunity in the next few years, or you look forward to that opportunity. Mr. Roshbaum mentioned workforce housing, receiving a tour. There will be a meeting of the Education Housing Corporation Board at MP Brown at the end of April. And there's going to be a brief tour right before that meeting. So I'll get that date and time to you so that you can join along. And we're not going to notice it as a meeting, so just remember, you don't talk about district business when you're together. So we'll remind you, I'll be around, I'll listen. Keep you guys on the straight and narrow. And that's it. Thank you to the JFK students. You are welcome to stay. We'll be here till at least 9 or 9:30. But you are also welcome to leave. And again, to the students that we did not have a certificate for, we'll get your name and we'll get that to your school here in the next week.
Thank you. No one wants to stay until 9:30 with us? No. Yes, get your rest.
Me too, so I feel you.
All right, as they are exiting, we are going to move on to our general functions. We're going to go to item 7A, consent agenda. The administration recommends approval of the start items on the rest of the agenda. Is there any comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion approved. Moving on to item 7C, resolution number 230308 to excuse Trustee Liaiga Anawai from the regular board meeting on February 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I motion.
Second.
We have a first and a second. This is a roll call. Ms. Culveray?
Mr. Rashba,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. Motion is approved. Moving on to item 7F, 2023 CSBA Delegate Assembly Elections discussion. The board will select up to 3 candidates to be considered as delegates to the CSBA Delegate Assembly, and this is also an action. Any discussion or questions on this? Superintendent Vidales?
Yeah, so we have 3 candidates who submitted interest in being considered as a delegate representative for our region, and you get to vote for 3. You don't have to vote for 3. You can vote for 1, you can vote for 2 or 3. So if you would like to make a motion for all 3, you can do so.
Question. Do we all have to agree to all 3, or I'm assuming yes, or
If the motion is made one by one, you can vote on it one by one. So as president, you can decide if you would like to take one at a time or if you would like to do the slate.
I guess I'll go to my fellow trustees. Do you all have any, I guess, comments or discussions on what you would like to do? If not, we can go one by one and then go from there. Do you all have the names of those people? I guess I want to make sure that we're also all prepared with that. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So one of them is our trustee in our neighboring school district, Ms. Kalima Salahuddin. We also have the current president of San Mateo County School Board Association, Mr. Gregory Land. And the third one is a board member in one of the South County school districts. I can't recall her name, but I will get it before you vote on her.
I do remember that this was in our packets. 2 of them I am aware of and I know them. One of them I am not, and so in full transparency, I feel comfortable moving forward with the 2 versus the 3. However, if there is I guess dissension on that, then we can do it one by one. If not, then we can do the vote together for 2 versus 3. That was.
And the third one is Miss Heather Hopkins. Yeah.
So with that, then I think that as a board, we've discussed and decided that we would like to select 2 of the candidates. Gregory Lang. Lang. Sorry.
Land.
And then Kalima Salahuddin.
Okay.
As our 2. Do I have a motion for that?
I motion.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That was unanimous. We're going to be moving on to item 7G, district calendar for the 2023-24 school year. This calendar has been determined as a part of the school district's calendar committee process as in alignment with the Jefferson Union High School District calendar for the 2023-24 school year. The administration recommends approval of the district calendar for the year. Are there any?
Move that we approve the district calendar for 2023-2024.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. We're going to be moving to item 8, educational and student services. 8B, resolution number 230308A to approve childcare and development services with CDE for 2022-2023 fiscal year. So this is to provide child care and development services with the California Department of Education to authorize the designated personnel to sign contract documents for the fiscal year 22-23. Are there any questions, comments from fellow trustees? I have one question. When I reviewed the documents, obviously, it does not include the incoming superintendent. Will we have to put this back on as a resolution right before your retirement?
This item typically comes to the board in June or July, and we didn't realize we didn't have it until we needed to reference it earlier this month. So it's a bit delayed, but yes, in June or July, or we won't have a meeting scheduled in July, but certainly in August, in the June meeting, we'll get new signatories for all of the new staff.
Can we just note to a reminder so that we're not delayed on it? My concern is that you leave and then the summer happens, we have no meetings, and then the incoming superintendent has no authority to sign anything.
I live close by. I can come by and sign anything.
Awesome. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, then I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the resolution 8B.
Second.
There is a first and a second. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Covray?
Mr. Rashba?
Aye.
Mr. Ali? Aye. Mr. Sujisaka?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye. That was unanimous. Moving on to item 8E, Special Education Department updates. Dr. James Adams, Director of Special Education, will provide updates on the Special Education Department.
I probably could use that stool. Hi, good evening. I'm James Adams. I'm the Director of Special Ed. Just to kind of give you a little background, this is my 23rd year here in Jefferson. I started off as a school psychologist, and then I transitioned to be the coordinator of school-based mental health, and then I've been the Director of Special Ed for the past 9 years. So nice to meet everyone. Oh, here's my little clicker. So we spent a lot of time here in the past 9 years really thinking about our culture in special education, and we came up with the idea that we believe a culture which promotes everyone belongs here in Jefferson. And we're making progress on this, and we have a lot to be proud of. And I'll talk just a little bit about our background and then some of the challenges we have now and some of the strengths we have now. So early on, what we did is we started thinking about ways to support students who had different learning needs here in Jefferson. And we needed to do a cultural shift. At that time, Ms. McCulloch was actually the assistant superintendent. And we really worked very hard to get a belief statement about all of our kids and their learning. And it was, we believe that special education is not a place. So it's not some place you send kids. Rather, it's a system of services to meet the needs of the child. And that was a little bit of a shift. We used to think it was over there, someone else did it. And we have about 150 dedicated staff who are in my special ed department, our special ed department. That's a lot of people and many different school sites. And when we started developing, 9 years ago, we actually didn't have very many students in special day classes. And then as time grew, we started realizing we were sending kids away from our district instead of serving them. There was also a pattern of happening that programs were getting more expensive or closing down. So we started bringing children back to our school district where they belong. That was a process that took about, 5 years to kind of get going. And what also happened during that time is we changed our cultural belief system. We used to have special day classes with kids that had learning disabilities or maybe speech and language impairments. And over that time period, over the past 9 years, we don't have any kids in our special day classes that have learning disabilities or speech and language impairments only. Kids in our special day classes are kids who have developmental disabilities such as autism, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, things like that. So they're kids that have what I like to call moderate needs in our school district. So that was part of the change that's happened over the past 9 years. And these are the type of support staff that we need to have here. We still call our programs where kids live in a classroom with their teacher a special day class. Some districts have changed that name. We still continue to call it that name, just so you know, special day class. And we have a resource specialist program, which is basically what kids live in a gen ed classroom and they get pulled out for certain services. Of course, we have speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, adaptive PE, mental health for our kids in special ed, behavior support, and nursing. All of those type of people support our programs. Of course, I'm not going to go through all this, but I think just as an overview so that you're getting to know our programs, you can see how many people in which areas that we have. So this kind of talks about the administrators, the credentialed, and the classified people that we have in the district that make up about that 154 students, or people, sorry, not students, that are in our programs. I really can't see that, just to be honest with you. I'm not sure if you can, because my contacts are not working very well. But you can see that it totals up to about 153 people. So one of the things that I am very proud about here in the district is that over a long period of time, over 9 years, we've worked extremely hard to be on time. Our district is not out of compliance in terms of timelines that we do, turning in work, parent input, 60-day timelines, all of those things that some districts continue to struggle. Our staff is amazing in making sure that those timelines are met. And many districts in California are late. They are. Many districts here in San Mateo County are late, and we're one of the lowest rates. We have almost none late. If they're late, it might be a student moved away or they're traveling, and we just couldn't reach them, and so we kind of indicate that why it's late, but it's not late because our staff didn't do their work, which is still true given after COVID, despite staffing shortages. We still are doing an amazing job in that area. That's the staff. I mean, they're really exceptional. So what I wanted to talk about really is sort of the numbers of students that live in our programs here. So remember, our special day class are kids that live in a classroom with a teacher. This is the number of students that we have 19 different special day classes here. We have 18 different people that do RSP, and you can see the numbers of students that within our special ed program here within district. Sometimes you probably see that we have some students that are outside of district and more specialized programs. I'm not counting those here. One thing I really wanted to talk about is, you know, throughout the district, we often have talked about declining enrollment. And one of the things that we're noticing here in Jefferson is that our special day class population of students, the students that I kind of talked about as being moderate needs, we are not seeing a decline in enrollment for some reason. We actually have about 5 more students than we did pre-pandemic. That is not the same pattern that we're seeing in our gen ed classrooms. RSP and speech, we do see some of the declines as well, but it's still not at the same level that we would expect to have seen for the overall population. So we have a phenomenon going on that our special day classes are continuing to grow, where some of our district gen ed programs are shrinking. Okay. I know Mr. Lowe was looking at me about that. Yes, that's absolutely true. It's happening here. We do have students that are outside of our district in things called non-public schools, schools like Spectrum or Wings. There's different schools that support students that have needs that we feel that they might need more supportive environments. They're not on integrated campuses is what that means. They're usually on a segregated site. And those are the number of students that live there. We have some students in our county program, San Mateo County Office of Ed. And then we still have some students that attend other public schools because we don't have certain programs like Hard of Hearing. So we make agreements with maybe San Francisco Unified or San Jose, which is pretty far, but you know sometimes we have to do that. So we have a couple students that live outside of our district at other schools because we don't have the staffing for them based on their disability. So that's what those students are. You know, some of the challenges that we have, like many districts, is still around staffing, but I have to say, you know, HR and Mr. Valenti's office has done a tremendous job. We do start off every year with a deficit. We know they're not filled where we need them to be. And over time, we get staffed. And, you know, I know it's slow and it's frustrating for our students and for our teachers and families sometimes. But we're all doing the best we can to try to get the staffing numbers up. But we are currently at the staffing ratio we want, but you know, 3 people are out sick, we're short that day. That happens. One thing that's pretty remarkable still, and I kind of look over my shoulder because I'm not sure how long it will be like this sometimes, but we have filled all of our special ed teacher openings right now, except for one RSP position. It's putting stress on our RSPs for sure. And for some of them, they are such professionals. Some of them are willing to do work after hours and things like that. We give them timesheets. But that is one position we've had open all year. Of course, it's posted on EdJoin, and we look for contractors. We have not been able to fill that for this year. We also have one nurse opening position, but we did find a contracted person to come help us. So that's really good news. And what's also we're experiencing is the County Office of Education has certain services that we may not have in district, like kids that are hard of hearing, need assistive technology evaluations, or visual, VI is visual impairments. And those are people that would do assessments for us. And we're getting into a challenging where we need kids, some kids need these type of assessments, and we're struggling to find people to do them for us. And so we look for contractors, we look for we also, I work with other directors around our area to see if they have someone who could maybe help us. But those are some of the challenges of staffing that we still have around here. What I talked about again is that 9 years ago, we began this process of serving our most needy students in district, kids that have autism or intellectual disability. And at that time, we adopted something called the Unique Learning System. The board, the trustees were very nice to adopt that. We piloted that. It's a differentiated system that is aligned to the Common Core, but it has 3 levels of differentiation for kids that might need paper or hands-on, kids that can use iPads, kids that can be more abstract. And those 3 levels have been very successful in supporting some of our kids early on as we transitioned. And we've been successful in doing that, and we have documentation to show how that was working. What's been going on lately is that some of the challenges of our non-public supports, like Spectrum, Wings, other places, County Office of Ed programs. So we've had some kids that maybe have even more needs that we might not be able to think about supporting, that we may have sent to the segregated sites. And I'm saying segregated, and that word means that they don't have access to their gen ed peers. So we take that really seriously. When we make those type of recommendations, we're saying these kids need a different setting than being on an integrated site. And the idea is always to transition them back to district. That's always the idea, to do that. So because of these decreased programs, what we're happening, and we're seeing this increase in special day classes, inside our special day programs, we're seeing some kids with maybe different needs. We're starting to refer to them as they have some more facilitated needs that might be a little different than some of the makeup for our special day classes. So right now we're collecting information, collaborating with teams to understand if and how maybe a new strand of SDC needs to be developed. One that's a little bit more facilitated, where kids might, for example, need much more concrete materials, right, or life skill type materials than some of the other programs that Unique offered. So we're right now working with principals and our teachers and staff and other groups to gather information. And of course, if we're trying to think about this, we're going to start talking with our community and our parents and different school sites to think about that. But this is something we're trying to think about, because if we don't have options for kids who have these needs to go to, there are kids, how do we support them here? Right, so that's really one of the things we're doing. And I'm calling it the second strand. It's just to think about that. And I talked just a little bit about this here. Least restrictive environment is one of the tenets of special education. That means we want kids to be as close to the gen ed as possible. That's what least restrictive environment means. And we have made a lot of progress. That was one maybe 6 years ago. It was an area that we were struggling on. We worked as a team, and we had different types of meetings going on in the district at that time, and we made progress. That kids are getting mainstreamed who are in special day classes. Kids that are in RSP are getting some services sometimes within their classrooms, same with speech. So that has allowed us to continue to make progress on least restrictive LRE, in the district. But it's always a work in progress, right? We've also adopted UDL curriculum to try to help our gen ed teachers understand more about differentiation, to maintain that LRE type of conversation. But we continue to have some challenges, and there's some new challenges that maybe are coming up around, did I go the wrong way? Wait a minute, sorry. some remaining challenges that, sometimes we have kids that are in our special day classes that might be at a site that, so how can I explain it? We have some kids, for example, that might be in a special day class at one site, let's use George Washington, where there might be 5 kindergartners in that special day class. But George Washington, due to the overall Gen Ed declining enrollment, has 1 class of kindergarten there. So you have kids that, the teacher's like, I'm full, or I'm almost full, and I have kids coming in. So one of the things we're thinking about, and I'll talk a little bit about our special ed committee that we have, is trying to understand what does that look like across the district? Is that equal in every school, or is it due to some small schools like George Washington? It may not be the same at other sites, right? So we're collecting that information. And we have in this district something called the Special Ed Committee, which is a joint venture between AFT and the district. And really, it's a collaborative work group with special ed teachers and gen ed teachers and administrators to come together to talk and problem solve through things. We started a conversation around mainstreaming before the pandemic, and we came up with some guidelines and some ideas about how to support and staff mainstreaming ideas, which were working. But some of the changes that I just talked about within our special day programs is basically putting more pressure on, right? And so we need to look at this. We already had one meeting. We're having one tomorrow morning, 8:15. I'll be here in this room. And it's a very active way of looking at what are some ideas, what are solutions, and again, is it the same all over the district? Is it different within different schools? So tomorrow morning, I'm going to be bringing in some data for the team to look at how it looks at each school, what students are there, how many really are being mainstreamed, because the truth is not every kid in SDC is mainstreamed. So we're going to look through all that data together, and I think it's just, when I talk to my colleagues in other districts about this type of thing, they're jealous, to be honest, because you often don't have that collaboration between gen ed and special ed going on. And it's very, very helpful. So what's next? We're going to continue working through our special ed committee to think about mainstreaming. We're going to go on talking about LRE, and we're going to continue talking about perhaps this different strand or things that we need to talk about. Stakeholder meetings, based on some recommendations that we get. Some kids might be moving to a different school. We might have another program. I'm not really sure yet. We might do something very small. We might, who knows? But of course, I'll keep everyone here, trustees and everyone in the district, apprised of what we're doing and how ideas we're coming up with. But it's become very clear that the changes that we're seeing within the district is telling us that some kids need something different. And so that means we need to think differently about how we provide services to them. Okay, that's really what my little presentation was on tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Sure.
Are there any questions or comments from fellow trustees? If so, I'm going to start on my right.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Adams. As a new trustee, it was really helpful to hear you go back into the history of our program and how it's progressed, and I applaud the progress that you've made, particularly on LRE. That seems extremely important. I guess the question I had came from a question I asked. There was an item on our consent agenda involving one of the vendors providing behavioral support services, and I was asking Superintendent Vidalis about that. It turned into just a larger question of how you find vendors like that, and I was wondering if you could talk about if that is a challenge as well, but if you need a support that needs to come from outside the district, how you go about that, and any challenges faced there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are many vendors out there. We try to look for ones that are SELPA approved. So our San Mateo County SELPA approves certain people through basically they have to agree to certain things. So we look for those first. The truth is, every day I probably have a dozen calls and 5 dozen emails from vendors looking for that. And they all purport to have people, but rarely do they have people, just to be honest. So they want you to think about them, but they don't always have someone. So every day, oh, we see you have an RSP. So they want me to communicate with them, but they really don't have anyone. So it is a lot of fishing, I'll just be honest. So what happens is once we find someone, from an agency. Let's say they had a resource specialist teacher. We ask them to send their resumes and we interview them. We talk to them, we see if they're a good fit. But to be honest, most of the time, there's a lot of change that you probably see because let's say we might hire a behavior person. They work the contractor so they can leave at any moment. They can just give us a notice. So you see a lot of rotation of people coming in and out. That's why we want to hire within district. And that's why we try to hire within district, right? That's what we try to do first. So long story short is it's an ongoing process of getting to know the people, making sure that they're approved. If they're not approved and through the SELPA, we do have our own contract that we can use with them. Mr. Lauro helps us to go through and do that. So that's pretty much the process, but they are also really struggling to find people to support, to actually present to us. Yeah, so everyone is really struggling, particularly in this area, to find any special educators to do work. And I think it's statewide, especially along the coast. You know, it's really difficult. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Good evening.
Thanks.
First of all, thank you you mentioned something when you first started talking about, you mentioned something about belonging. I think that's important because people already know the word inclusion when we talk about specialized academic instruction. And there's a lot of talk now about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, belonging is actually a higher level because anyone can be included, but do they feel like they actually belong? That's the question. So thank you for mentioning that word. And also thanks for, like you said, bringing our students back, some of them, right? So I do have actually kind of a lot of questions, so bear with me.
Can I ask that we ask one and then go ahead just in case someone else has that same question, and we'll come back to you?
I'm not sure if they're going to have my questions, but
I don't have that many questions this time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do have, yeah, whatever you two decide.
The goal is so that one person is not like monopolizing all of the questions and giving a chance to everyone. So that my goal is just to go back and forth, just that way everyone has a chance to.
Okay. Well, I have like 4 or 5 questions, so I'll ask my first question and then
Yes.
pass.
Perfect.
Okay. So question number 1. If a student has so you mentioned one disability, or I like to use the word exceptionality as well. How is that student placed then if they're not in, I think you said SDC class anymore? What is the placement for a student that just maybe has, anyway, I'll let you go first.
So, you know, most of our students are in gen ed classrooms. So if you're not in a special day class program, meaning you have a teacher who sees those classes, oversees those classes, and those students might be mainstreamed into a gen ed class, but they live with their special day class teacher. But most of our students in district live in a gen ed classroom. So kids that might have different learning challenges, language challenges. We have kids with autism, intellectual disability, who also are in gen ed classrooms. It doesn't go by disability where you go. It's an individualized education plan. So each team talks about the needs the student has, where they can best be served in LRE. So we have kids that have, intellectual disabilities, autism, different learning challenges, attentional challenges, all within our gen ed. The majority of them are within gen ed environments. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if I was.
Yes, that's a great answer. Thank you.
Well, it's the truth.
All right, so I have 2, but I'll ask one and then we'll alternate.
Okay.
My first question is, so I know you mentioned short staffing and, you know, schools all over are short staffed, especially when it comes to resource specialists. So what does the district do or school sites do when we are short staffed? Like, what is our plan for those students? Who's pushing in those classrooms? And then, who subs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we have based on the agreement that we came up with the special ed committee with mainstreaming, we have a process that we go through where the gen ed teacher and the special ed teacher sit together and plan that. And if the gen ed teacher feels that they need support, at least for as long as they need it, then a paraprofessional will go with that student, right? And you're right, sometimes what's happening is students, let's say the paraprofessional's out, and the teacher's down 2 paras because people are out and they're struggling, sometimes that student, may not be able to go to mainstreaming unless the gen ed teacher says, I'm okay. I can deal with that today. We can do it. We can do it. The kid's been coming here a lot. I know what to do. So sometimes there are challenges around that. I would say they're not usual, but they happen at times. But that's really because we want to make sure the kid in the classroom is supported. All right, because a paraprofessional going with a special needs student isn't for the student. Sometimes it's for the whole class so that the gen ed teacher can help the student, right? It's just to give a little bit of thing. But I would say most of the teachers feel that, after a while, they don't need a paraprofessional there, to be honest. The kid gets used to the routine. They know what they're doing there. They know it's circle time. They know it's whatever activity it is. They get some peer buddies around them. But that can be a challenge around paraprofessionals. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that there's times where the general ed teacher feels confident and empowered enough to say, hey, I don't need a para in here anymore. Very glad to hear that. Let me see. Second question. Oh, so hopefully this is not controversial for any teachers that are listening, but do we have any co-taught classes, and has that been discussed at the committee or from you? Because I haven't heard anything about co-taught classes.
That's a really good question. So people know co-taught is sometimes a special educator and a gen ed teacher together who work in a classroom to support. That was an area we were moving closer to with the declining, what should I say, not declining, the inability to find teachers. It makes it very challenging because you need more special educators to often implement that type of program. What we do is our RSPs are encouraged to do push-in rather than pull out when possible, right? So there's an old model of resource specialist programs where they pull kids out, they take them to a little room, they help them do something, and thinking that they're going to go back and generalize that to what happened in the classroom. So there's some challenges we're still working on, but that's one of the first steps that we're trying to do. But when you start thinking about a co-taught model, you often need one RSP or one special educator per school site, and we're not at that place. We're down one. So most of our RSPs, unless they're at a middle school, are sharing at least 2 schools. And we haven't had 3 schools yet, but with this one RSP that's down, like it's some are supporting in other places, many of them are supporting other people who are really struggling with high caseloads, over 28, because RSPs have a cap of 28. Right, so they don't have to see a student over 28. They may see someone and they can be compensated for that, but they don't have to see that student. So that's really where I think maybe if we had come here maybe 5 before the pandemic, we'd be talking about moving toward that direction more and more. But I think myself and other directors, it's been a challenge to maintain that system in districts that have done that because of the staffing shortages that we have.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I just want people who are listening to know that co-teaching and the whole concept of having co-taught classes is not very easy. There are places where it's done well, or even maybe one class inside of a school where you see the ideal situation. However, if you don't have co-teaching, push in is a better model than pull out. So I'm glad to hear that our district is saying that, because pulling out is a part of that, not including again, so thank you for at least saying that we're pushing in as opposed to pulling out.
We're trying. It's still a work in progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned distribution of students between the schools, like SDC students, or like how you distribute them. How would you say distribution is done between schools?
Yeah, one of the things about belonging is that when I came into the district, we used to have a process where kids would be in a special day class, let's say, I don't know, Daniel Webster for kindergarten, first, second. Then they'd move over to Westlake, right, for third and fourth. And then they'd move to middle. So they never felt like they're part of their school. So what we did is create hubs or continuations or continuums for students. So we have kids at MP Brown, JFK, FDR, where kids can go and stay there and belong at that school. Get a sweatshirt. I always say, just to get a sweatshirt, because if you're moving around a lot, how do you belong at that school? And there's challenges around that. I'm not saying it's perfect, and that's continuing what we're working through around mainstreaming in particular. But that really is the idea of why we have them in certain places, so that it's more about kids. It's not saving us money for transportation. It's not about that. When we came up with this idea, it was really about how to have families and kids feel like they belong to a place. And FDR, they can stay there till 8th grade, for example, right?
So then I guess how are they distributed between the schools?
Oh, do you mean how do you decide if they go to JFK or they go? So
yeah.
usually, to be honest, most of the time right now it goes by where do they live, right? So it's a little bit regionalized. I'm not going to say that that's always 100% because sometimes we do look at class makeup and we have a kid with maybe more exceptional needs than others, and we might make an idea that this student might be best going to this school. But by and far, we try to keep them closer to their home, right? So if they're living near JFK or living near George Washington, those are the schools they go to. And same if they live near Tobias, then they might go over to FDR or MP Brown. Just so it's not, it's a regionality idea, but it's not we do also individualize where we think kids might do best.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up question, but I'll let Trustee Ali go first.
This is a short question. And I know that we go up to 8th grade, so there might not be a lot of this, but do we have students that ever exit the services?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. We absolutely do have students that exit services. I would say particularly in speech, right? Kids, that's probably the largest exits that we have, kids who start off with different articulation or language disorders, as they say. They tend to exit out pretty quickly. We also have kids that have, different learning disabilities, but as we know, for special education, just because you have a learning disability doesn't mean that you automatically get an IEP. It has to adversely affect your education. So if you have an attention disorder and you're doing great in your class with some modifications and support, we can provide them. You don't need special education. Maybe they need a 504 plan or something like that. Same with kids with dyslexia. Some kids can learn to read well enough, but maybe they just read a little bit more slowly. So we give them extra time through a 504, but they don't need special education support anymore. So we definitely have students that exit. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Once again, I'm glad to hear what I'm hearing right now because I teach special ed at a high school, and there's several students that I come across that I'm always wondering why weren't they given a chance to exit. And sometimes the parents, just to let you all know, when you get to 11th, 12th grade, there's sometimes parents who are in there asking me like, why do they still have this? So thank you.
I echo exactly what you just said, Trustee Ali. And then, so I guess my follow-up question from the distribution was, so you mentioned it's based on location. Do you ever notice that certain locations may get higher populations than others? So like they're not as easily or evenly distributed?
That is a really good question because as we're starting to collect the information, when we see the declining enrollment, it looks to me, and I haven't talked, but it looks like it's more on our eastern side of the city, where we're having more declining enrollment than to the western side. So we're seeing a lot of preschoolers who are being assessed right now, and their home schools are all around Thomas Edison, Daniel Webster, and Westlake, right? And we have 3 preschool SDCs that are 2 at JFK and 1 at General Pershing, right? And so it's putting pressure on, if we're trying to keep them closer to home. So I think there are different trends that are happening that we need to be aware of and thinking about. Most of our parents do self-transport for preschool, even though they technically could get busing, but they do which I can understand if they can do that. But, we still want to keep them closer to home. I mean, if you live right here near Daniel Webster, to drive over to General Pershing is going to take you a little bit of time. But that's a really good question. We are noticing that due to the declining enrollment, that things look a little different. It used to be more equalized. So that's definitely one of the things we see.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. San Jose, what program is there that, why are we sending someone way to San Jose?
This is a student, that has a hearing impairment, deaf, hard of hearing, and they have a program. We do not have one in San Mateo County. So that student goes every day to San Jose for that program. And we provide transportation to that student. It's a very specialized need that that student has. The student potentially could have lived in Fremont, right? The family could have chosen things like that, but it's a residential program. So over that decision, the family chose San Jose to go there.
So so we have no program at all for hard of hearing in San Mateo County?
Deaf and hard of hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had a representative from David Canepa's office here tonight. I wish he was still here to hear that. But anyway, we need to get that message out to people at the county that, is there something we can do about this?
Yeah. I think we all, as directors in San Mateo County, we talk about the needs, and part of it is they're open to some of the needs. It's still teachers and staffing shortages. So even right now, for example, the County Office of Ed has a program for students that have emotional disabilities. But it's not like they can just accept everyone who has a need for that, because the teacher is, brand new and they're trying, it's just, there's a lot of, our County Office of Ed is struggling, not to defend, but they're struggling with the same problems we have, which is staffing, right? And then, but what also happens is us up north here, that's why we had a student also who had some, we call low incident disabilities, deaf and hard of hearing, things like that, who went to San Francisco Unified in our agreement. Because we try to reach out, but since we're up north here, if this student lived in San Carlos, San Jose is still far, but not as far as from up here, right? So there is an equity issue that I feel strongly about, that our students have to travel so far around these issues. So, but it's definitely something that we talk about at our SELPA, Special Education Local Plan meetings that we have there at county. About these needs that we have, and Ms. Notch, who oversees those county programs, is always there to be able to hear our needs.
All right. So for you mentioned you're planning or hoping to have a new, I don't like using this word, SDC strand. So would that be a more restrictive environment, a less restrictive environment, or same?
I think it would just be a more differentiated environment, right? So what I talked about is that unique language system has 3 levels of differentiation. That's part of that. And our teachers are masters at differentiation, but there's some students that might have, what should I say? Communication needs where kids have no language, right? Who aren't able to access that. Often with autism, who have no language, right? And so they're really struggling to be able to access the curriculum that we did for that differentiation. And we always had a couple students like that, right? And that's when we'd say, well, maybe this student can go to Spectrum, or maybe this student might be best served because they had those programs. We're not saying we're doing it. We're saying we're trying to collect information. And again, we still call it special, but that's why I like the term facilitated class. It needs a different facilitated environment for those students to have success. And it probably is going to be around communication and behavior are going to be the 2 things, because we know that what is behavior? An intent to communicate, right? So these students often have behavioral needs that are directly aligned to their inability to communicate and understand some of the curriculum that might be happening in those classrooms. I'm not saying it's a groundswell that we have many, but at the same time, if we don't have options for students to go to, then we need to think ethically, how do we serve our students here in district? And so we're just beginning that conversation to think through that.
Okay, thank you. I think that you knew what I was asking, because you said behavior, communication. That was what I was getting at. What would be the difference? And I think that is good that you're thinking about it and that you're planning and trying to offer options. I appreciate that. So I had a question about mainstreaming. You mentioned that there are ideas. What are some of those ideas about mainstreaming that are being talked about?
Well, I mean, we didn't invent, there's many different models of mainstreaming that go on, right? There's districts where kids are at their home schools, right? Kind of a co-teaching model, and every kid's on a gen ed roster. There's no special day class programs. There's barriers to that, but something to think about. There's other programs where some kids might count on a gen ed roster. There's other programs where you might have additional classroom support person there all day long. Or more training for the special day, less kids in the classroom who are gen ed for them to come in, and more training for the gen ed teacher. I mean, there's many, many, many different things that we can think about, and that's why we want to bring it to our special ed committee, and they can probably come up with ideas. I mean, that's actually what the activity is tomorrow. Like, here's the data, help us think through this. What are ideas? Whatever it is, just open your minds and let's try to think through some possible solutions through this. That's exactly what we're doing here tomorrow morning. Because we don't have the solutions, and we have unique needs that we're a pretty large district relatively in San Mateo County, and we have lots of little schools and we have some big schools, right? Everything's not the same, so there's a lot of unique needs, and one size isn't going to fit all. That's why we need all these constituent voices to be able to talk to us about what could work here, different ideas. I suspect, one size isn't going to fit all, doesn't work in special ed. We might have to have individualized education plans for different schools based on their needs and which kids are being mainstream. Because like I said, you might have a special day class with 7 kindergartners in there. Maybe only 2 are really being mainstream besides lunch, recess, and PE. We don't know. And that can vary from year to year. Every time you have a new IP, that could change. So it's a very dynamic process that's always going on. And so it's really hard to think through all those intricate details, but I know that the special ed committee team has really worked well together, and I'm very encouraged that we can continue. It's going to be ongoing conversation. We're not going to solve it tomorrow, just so you know. Brad's going to come back. But we're going to continue thinking through these different activities.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue to my last question,
Okay.
which is actually more of a comment. Well, there's a question too. So the special education committee, you said it has general ed teachers, admin, and specialized academic instructors. Anyone else in that, like parents or students, or is it just those 3?
It's no parents or students. It really is Mr. Hagan is there, and I'm there, and then we have other administrators, principals that are over schools that have SDCs, for example, also attend. Mm-hmm. So, and then we have represented groups there. We also have classified. Sorry, I should say that too. We have classified personnel there that attend as well.
Okay, so my last question about that is this something that we're innovating in our district, or do you know of any other districts that have something like this? Because I've never heard of this, and I think it's a good idea.
I have to give kudos to Mr. Hagan, because he's the person I think that came up with that. I'm not really sure how that came about, but that idea of creating this formalized way of saying we work together, I honestly don't know any other district. Maybe you heard it somewhere else. I'm not sure.
It really, again, really came out of our labor management collaboration, and a way of looking at how to find solutions to problems. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the committee kind of came out of, maybe I didn't, I don't remember, maybe it was at the meeting.
Yeah.
The committee kind of came out of we were going through a lot of changes in how SPED services were being delivered, and so we found that we wanted to try working collaboratively. It was actually something that Sandy and I worked on through negotiations, Brian and the team.
Yeah.
So I think Mr. Ali and Mr. Hagan pointed this out, was that we have now a long history of labor management collaboration, certainly at least a decade. And, when there are problems that require a solution, we consider how might we collaborate on developing that solution versus having administration decide on what the solution is, and then staff may or may not be in agreement with that, and then you set up the polar opposites. So when there are opportunities, and we can't do too many of these every year, we do try to form collaborative conversations around this, and we've come to solutions on a variety of different problems: the healthcare, contributions, special education. There's lots of smaller things, and we try to model that for the school sites as well, so that things like a recess yard duty could be a collaborative conversation instead of just a one-way conversation.
Thank you. I think this is a testimony to the mindfulness and respect that we're all fostering with looking at what's in the best interest of the students. So thank you.
All right.
Are there any further questions or comments from trustees?
Just one last one. Wow. Great job. You answered all of our questions and you kept a positive attitude throughout the whole thing. And you were very factual. So really appreciated. Just like, wow.
My pleasure. You know how to reach me if you have questions.
As I realized that I did the question back and forth to allow for each person to at least get their questions out. And I realized that now you guys are asked all the questions that I have no questions. And also then you ended it with wow, because that's what I was going to say is you really presented so well. You were very thorough. The fact that you're thinking about equity, belonging, you're thinking about using the data, innovative practices, looking at what the surrounding districts are doing. I mean, just overall, I'm just very thrilled and happy with this presentation. I know that we still have a long way to go. However, I just think that this is a great foundation and starting point. And with you, Dr. Adams, at the helm of it, I have trust and belief that we're going to get to our goals very quickly and well. So thank you again for your presentation. And I look forward to seeing hopefully what comes out of that meeting tomorrow morning at 8:15. Hopefully try to get you out of here soon so that you can get back here early in the morning and be prepared for that probably really engaging discussion. So thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure. And it really is a team, right? It's not one person. Yes. Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to another hot topic, the Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP, process updates. Ms. Scott, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, will update the board on the plan for 2021 to 2024 LCAP.
Great, thank you. The hard act to follow. All right, so I'm here tonight to speak about the Local Control Accountability Plan timeline. So the Local Control and Accountability Plan, the LCAP, communicates the local educational agencies, the LEAs, actions and expenditures to support student outcomes and overall performance. The LCAP is a 3-year plan, which is reviewed and updated annually as required. The JESD LCAP plan was adopted in 2021, and so we are in our 2nd year of implementation. The LCAP memorializes the engagement with the LEA's educational partners in analysis and decision-making. It must include an annual review of the effectiveness of the goals, actions, and services from the prior year. And it must address the 8 state priorities and actions, and the actions also must address any areas of improvement identified on the California dashboard. So the 8 state priorities are basic services, implementation of state standards, parent involvement, pupil achievement, pupil engagement, school climate, course access, and other pupil outcomes. Priority 9 and 10 are for county offices of education. There are specific required elements for measuring progress within the 8 priority areas. LEAs may also include a variety of locally determined metrics when creating their LCAP. Metrics required for each LCFF state priority are listed here. The LCAP development and review process works on a continuous improvement model. Needs are assessed, root causes are analyzed, evidence-based actions are implemented, and then over time they are monitored and measured. The 5 goals in our LCAP are: Goal 1, prepare students to pursue college and or career once they graduate from high school. Goal 2, improve the academic success of our English learners. Goal 3, provide ongoing professional learning for all staff. Goal 4, increase customer satisfaction with respect to climate safety in schools. Goal 5, develop opportunities to bring the community together in support of our students and success. I've also provided you with a complete set of the metrics and actions developed per goal for your review. And one key aspect of the LCAP process is the engagement of all educational partners, staff, teachers, administrators, bargaining partners, community members, parents, guardians, and students, including foster youth, the homeless, and those from low-income and English learner communities are to be consulted to provide feedback on the plan. So this slide highlights the structures available to our engagement partners to provide input and feedback. We have a parent involvement advisory committee for parents. We have PTA, school site councils. We send out a panorama survey to all families and also an LCAP survey. For staff, we have our district administrator council. School sites have their site leadership teams. We have our newly developed teacher collaborative teams. We also send out a staff survey through Panorama. We also include ongoing feedback surveys, for example, after both institute days. We provide them with an LCAP survey as well, and we also meet through AFT Roundtable. For students, we send them out a Panorama survey as well. We're doing a follow-up right now, and they also have student council at the middle schools. And our community, we consult with community partners such as Star Vista, Daly City Youth Health Center, and Daly City Partnership. So our timeline over the next few months includes in March, this month, we are continuing to review the initial input that we've gathered. We are evaluating the findings and needs revealed in regular formative summative assessments, analysis, and we're beginning to draft next year's annual update. In April, we'll review the data from staff and family surveys and various teams and committees and continue drafting next year's LCAP. In May, we'll post the LCAP draft for public comment, gather additional input from the District Administrative Council, District Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, District English Language Advisory Committee, and the SELPA. And then in June, present LCAP and supporting documents to the board in a public hearing, and present LCAP and supporting documents to the Board of Trustees for approval, and then submit to San Mateo County Office of Ed. That's it. Any questions? All right, great. Just
You're not off the hook yet.
yeah, 2-second timeline. No.
Are there any questions or comments from fellow trustees? If so, I'll start on my right.
Sorry. Yeah, I just question, probably from perspective of being new, but in the last slide, it seemed like we would be presenting a new LCAP for the 23-24 school year, when I thought it was a 3-year plan and this would be the third year. Can you just talk about how differently we could how much we could expect the LCAP to change in what's presented for the next school year?
So if you look at the handout that I gave you, you'll see where it says year 2 outcome. So we spend this year collecting data, and we will complete the metrics and then develop any new actions or continue the actions we currently have in place. So it is a 3-year plan, but it's a living document. So we have the opportunity to, if an action has been completed, we can indicate that on our plan. If we have new actions that we would like to bring into play, we can. Does that answer your question?
How much how many new actions are there typically during the interim years of a LCAP?
I think last year Do you remember
Just a
any new-
handful.
yeah.
You know, I think up until last year, the LCAP format changed every year. So it was a new LCAP every year. Finally, we developed the LCAP in the spring of 21, and it stayed with that same format. So I think last year there's just a handful of places where the data pointed to somewhere like that we needed to pay more attention to. And, you know, the teacher collaborative teams was one of those actions that resulted a clearer and more sustained focus on universal design for learning. And certainly, I mean, you see that in our district initiatives, those sort of are included, but as a result of last year's analysis became sort of focus points. And then, of course, I see Mr. Lauro has his hand on the button. But, you know, the part of the LCAP is providing a budget updates as well. Like, did we do this action? Did it cost what we thought it cost? Did it cost more? And be able to report that out to our community.
Yeah, to follow up on that as well, sometimes when we're developing, so right now we're in budget development season, and sometimes, you know, Ms. Scott or Ms. McCulloch or Mr. Vidales will come up with something else where we think, hey, there's other services, or if we can hire specific personnel, or Mr. Adams might have something, positions where he's like, you know, we're going to hire this position to provide better targeted support or whatnot. And if it's a material enough expenditure when we're developing the budget, we'll add that to the LCAP, because we want to make sure that, you know, the public is aware of how we're spending the funds and how we're targeting places where we think we can improve. So like Ms. Scott said, it's a living and breathing document, and there could be some slight changes year over year.
I just have one question. Someone from the community brought something to my attention, and I had a question about the panorama results. There's data that, I guess, about the teachers, I guess. Well, I have a question. So the survey, when it goes out to the families, are they asked questions about the teachers in terms of school climate and culture and the behavior of the teachers?
I'd have to go back and look specifically at the questions. I can follow up if you'd like.
Yeah, I can send Superintendent Vidales some questions, because I know they had a question about who actually looks at the data about the teachers and then what's done about it, if anything. So I'll just send an email.
Surprisingly, I have one question. Thank you for being the annoying one last time, Mr. Ali. You took my position usually, so thank you. You mentioned so I saw a lot of ways that we were soliciting feedback from all stakeholders. I did notice that our target population who we're serving is our students, and they have the smallest category. I was wondering what sorts of other things that we could do to solicit more feedback about their own education from our students.
You know, one thing I would love to see more of are student fish bowls. You know, so an opportunity to get different types of students together and elevate their voice and get their perspective on what is happening. We just did a fishbowl in here with our administrators, and I think they have, in turn, are starting to do that with their teachers. It's something teachers can also do within their classrooms, and principals can pull a group as well. I think it's a way to get firsthand information that's more personalized in that type of an environment.
Thank you. No further questions.
Are there any further questions or comments from trustees? I just want to say thank you, Ms. Scott, for your presentation and fellow trustees for those questions. In relation to Trustee Rashba's question and kind of the responses, I think I'm really happy to hear that you're making changes as needed because I think it's very important for us to be proactive before, like a lot of times you wait until the very end. I know the last time you made a presentation on the LCAP, I had all of these comments and questions, and I was like, why are we waiting until everything is bad or it's showing a red flag? And so being able to get the outcomes and reviewing it and then using that data to make decisions on whether we need to use funds for something different or change to another program, I think is just going to be important. Again, keeping us on this equity path where we're putting our resources where they're most needed. And so I just want to commend you for taking some of that feedback and then moving forward. I think with UDL also, it's going to probably be some time before we really see actual change. And so I think for fellow trustees, we should just be cognizant of that because with the training that's being given, it could change the trajectory of what the results may mean this year versus next year.
Right.
So other than that, I think great presentation and thank you for being concise.
Yes, it was short. Short and sweet.
All right, we're going to move on to item 9B, resolution number 230308B, authorized signatures. The administration recommends the board adopt resolution number 230308, authorizing the signatories for Jefferson Elementary School District. Do I have a motion or any questions or comments on this item?
If not, Ali, do you have, Mr. Trustee, Ali, do you have, I motion to approve.
Second.
There is a first and a second. This is a roll call. Ms. Covery?
Mr. Rashba,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. That was unanimous. Motion approved. We will be moving on to item 9I. Let's see. 2022-23 second interim budget review. Michael Laurel, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, will present highlights of the 2022-23 second interim financial report for period ended January 31st of 2023.
Good evening. I'm going to try to be concise and be very concise. So now we on the train track of school business, we are at our second interim report. So for our new trustees, there are two different interim reports. There's the first interim and there's the second interim. First interim, the data is up through October 31st. Second interim, financial data is through January 31st, 2023. The multi-year projection that you're going to see is for 2023, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26. Following the second interim, I'll be giving a few more presentations. One would be the May revision governor's budget update, as well as the first iteration of the budget in the beginning of June, and then passing of the budget in LCAP at the end of June. So what we're really going to look at here is just the highlights between first interim, so October 31st through second interim, which is January 31st, and what are the variances. In our unrestricted general fund, we had a net increase in revenues of $323,000. Most of that came from LCFF, which is our main lion's share of our funding. We have some interest income. We did transfer in more money from our tech reserve because of the cost of our Category 2 access point project throughout the district. So that's increasing bandwidth for more devices to be on. Going back into Mr. Adams' presentation, we have an increased special ed contribution. So because of the increased services that we're giving to our special ed population, that does come at a cost. So we contribute additionally for those students. There was also a increase of $711,000 in our unrestricted general fund. We did move some salaries and statutory benefits to our restricted programs with the net savings, but a lot of the increases in expenditures were for software with the technology department. Our utility costs are up, gas prices are up a lot, as well as electricity. We did have, as you can see here, the $409,000 that we transferred in from Fund 17, our tech reserve. You can see that directly correlates here with our Category 2 infrastructure project. Slight increase in legal fees and a slight increase in our transportation for our special ed population. So now we're moving to general fund restricted monies, right? So these are dollars that are set aside for a specific purpose, whether it be from the federal government or the state. We did increase in revenues by about $766,000, mainly from ESSER 3 funds. We do have some Title I carryover. These are both federal dollars. If you guys can remember, the governor's January proposal, he did decide to cut our arts and music discretionary block grant by a third. So mainly the $851,000 was a result of that we recognized. Here you see an increase in restricted revenues because we are contributing additional monies from our unrestricted general fund. We do have some more side donations, and we did have a little bit more of our certificate of participation. So this is tied to our workforce housing project. So along with the increases of revenues, we're matching our expenditures to the revenues. We did have increased expenditures of $2.3 million. Partially, some of this is also coming from our bottom line, as in we had gotten additional restricted revenues, but we already have recognized the revenue, but now we're just spending those balances down. Get my notes. Some of the certificate salaries that increased, a lot of it was $575,000 in the certificate salaries is to increase our substitute costs. So our roving itinerant subs, because they're plugging in a lot for teachers who are out with COVID, and just the subs that we have at school sites, we decide because they're plugging in and pushing into classes that we're going to charge them to ESSER 3 funding. Some of the classified salaries that have gone up is our instructional aid substitutes. So from our special ed programs or SKIAs, and a lot of times they do additional hours between the different classes. So like Mr. Adams says, depending on the students we have, we try to really fit our staffing to meet those needs, right? So if those needs are going up and if our student population is growing, those needs go up, and so we have additional staff, right? So that's where you're seeing these additional expenditures in special ed. Other things, we've got more materials and supplies for special education, routine restricted maintenance for our school sites. Other services like our $175,000 contract for clearing out the trees for emergency services that comes out of routine restricted maintenance, which is a restricted fund. And also some capital improvements that came from the certificate of participation proceeds for our workforce housing project. So for our multi-year projection, we're coming up on Mr. Ku's favorite slide. So what we're using here in our assumptions are the governor's January proposal budget. So we're using everything that he thought is going to be happening in the next fiscal year. These will change when he comes out with the May revision. The cost of living adjustment, so this is a percentage that goes up on our funding every year. It goes up 8.13% in 23-24, and averaging about 3.25% or 3.3%, 3.4% in the 2 outgoing years. The unduplicated pupil percentage, it slightly decreases. These are students who are homeless, foster, English learning, free reduced meal. And as that as that percentage goes down, our supplemental concentration funding in our local control funding formula goes down. So we get additional funding for those students. We also include our cohort-based declining enrollment or declining ADA enrollment and our 3-year average daily attendance protection. And so on the left-hand side here, this is our average daily attendance. So this is 4,596.69 students. That's our P1, so our first interval of attendance that was taken. And to the right here is our 3-year average daily attendance funded ADA. So as you go through each fiscal year, you'll see that we lose about 346, 379, and 174.85 students, right? So you can see water definitely finds its level because our enrollment's down and our attendance is at 92, 93% with historical average at 96%. This is for us, we're in a big ship and we're always trying to see what's ahead and to steer the ship as we're going along. It's just something that we need to really take seriously. And in the future, this is going to have ramifications in our funding. But luckily, we're far enough out where we can see it coming and plan appropriately. So this is our multi-year projection for the second interim. From first interim to second interim, we had, at first interim, we're projecting a $3.1 million surplus. At second interim, we see a $400,000 decrease, and so $2.7 million surplus. In 23-24, we still have a healthy surplus. Our funding's great because of the COLA, right? In 24-25, that really shrinks a lot because of the number of students that we're losing and the 3-year average is going down. And then in the third year out here, you can see we're deficit spending because of the funding level finally reaching the 3-year average, right? It's funny because the state funding is going up, but our student numbers going down. So we're always just trying to find that equal balance. And I'll go back to what I had said in prior presentations. We do have adequate reserves so that if anything were to happen, we could have a strategic use in deploying those reserves to make sure there's no quick shocks to our system, okay? But for right now, to make it short and sweet, we're doing okay. So yeah, so things to consider, right? This only includes step and column. So for every year a staff member is here, they usually go up a step. It's a 1.5% increase average. This does not include raises. This assumes the cohort-based declining enrollment stays the same. That can change at the beginning of the year as Mr. Marquez Valenti gets more enrollment data in. There's no other potential federal targeted funds that we might have. And really, I think the biggest thing here is we're going to wait and see what's going to happen with the May revision of the budget. Any shocks or changes in tax revenue collection, what's happening in the stock market can definitely have a direct impact, right? Remember, there's the federal level or the countrywide level, there's the state level, then there's the local level, right? The county level. So we're just trying to keep an eye out to see what's going to happen for the state of California and how that's going to potentially affect us. But for right now, the good news is that there's 3 different certifications. We could be positive, we can be qualified, or we could be negative, right? So we are certifying a positive certification. That means that we are able to meet our current and future financial obligations. So this is a great thing. We're doing good. And like I said, the next presentation I'll give would be the May revision as another update and how that's going to affect our current year and future year's budget. And then the following 2 after that would be our actual budget for the next fiscal year. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lauro. Just for fellow board trustees, right? So this is an action item on the agenda. One, we're going to approve the filing of the positive certification. And then the second is the approval of the revision to the working budget to correspond with the projected year totals. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now, and I can start on my left-hand side.
You start on me when I have no questions. Thanks.
I only have one question. Slide 49. So are those percentages for COLA, are those guaranteed? We already know? Okay.
So this is the governor's proposal, right? This can change, especially since this 8.13% here for next year. So this money is coming from the reduction in arts and music discretionary block grant. This. So this, we're originally getting like $3.4 million. And yeah, we're losing that money, and he's using it to fund something that's ongoing, which is kind of a red flag. But we're going to wait and see what's going to happen, right? I think that every time I know that every time we show a multi-year projection, it's a snapshot in time, right? So we're utilizing all the best information that we have at the state level, at the county level, at the federal level, at the local level, understanding, who are employees, where's their biggest cost, right? And trying to, really forecast out what is it going to look like. But like I said, it's going to change. It's going to change in May, and it might change again after we approve the budget, right? In 2021, I always bring this up, we were going to lose 10% of our funding. And so we approved a budget that was like we're losing 10% of our funding, but after the budget was approved, they funded that full 10% back. So it was a whiplash effect. But it'll always change.
Trustee Rashba?
So 2 questions. First, in the slides 3 and 4 with the increases in the revenues and expenditures, is that a difference from what we thought we would be spending and taking in from the first interim to the second, or a difference in like the actuals, new spending and new revenues since then? Does that make sense?
So these are variances from first interim to second interim, right? So some of this is due to what was presented at the governor's budget, right? There's some things that the governor is saying that, hey, we're going to cut the funding for this, so expect your funding to be cut. So we're recognizing that here, right? There's other things that as we're going from October to January, a fine example is with Mr. Adams, and we're realizing, hey, these students are requiring additional support, right? Or, we're realizing that, hey, we're going to have to spend more money on transportation or whatnot. We're making those adjustments because initially in December, we're not thinking we're going to have to spend that money. But then as the year goes on, we're like, whoa, there's going to be an increased expenditures here because now the students are requiring it, right? So yeah, that's essentially, we're kind of, as we're going along, our budget is a living and breathing document. Things can change all the time. And by the time we, change, we get to the third interim / our budget adoption, this 2.7, it could change as well, right? For second interim, like our bottom line can change again. So, did I answer your question?
Yes. Sounds like responding to differences in state and local priorities. So, thank you. And then just on that slide you were just on, which I have is 6, the components of the ending fund balance, like I understand reserves and, and we have a balance saving for reserves. What are the fund balance designations?
So you took your seat in December 2022. So essentially at the end of fiscal year 21-22, because the Prop 98 reserve was greater, I'm forgetting the percentage. Essentially, we have a rainy day fund at the state level for Prop 98. Because it's at a certain level, schools that are LCFF funded or state funded, like Jefferson Elementary, we have a reserve cap of 10%. Okay, so 3% is our legally, we have to have 3% of our total expenditures in reserve. Okay. 3% doesn't cover 1 month's worth of payroll. So historically, by guidance of the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team in Sacramento, the threshold for elementary school districts is around 17 to 21%. So, but because of this law of the rainy day fund being at a certain level, we can't have over 10%. Our fund, the board had decided at the end of last fiscal year, which would be June, to designate $6.1 million towards ongoing staff increases in salary, right? So what's going to happen is, you know, if increases in salary start to happen, and as you see here, our funding goes down, any types of increases that we give is going to make this red go even redder, of which then we're going to have to deploy these funds, right? So that's what that $6.156 million is. And you can go back on our website and look at the resolution of how that money gets there. So by designating that money to be there, it puts us below the 10%. And if we're below the 10%, the state doesn't come in and take over the excess that we have. We protect the money that, you know, we're safeguarding our fund balance.
Can you go back to slide 48, please? So the workforce housing, 303,000 capital improvements, is that change orders?
No, so when we did the certificate of participation, so it's at with BNY Mellon, a bank, and so it was about $10 million, but when a significant amount of money is sitting in a bank account, especially nowadays with interest rates being so high, the guaranteed rate of return kicks off some interest, and so that's just a little bit of extra interest, which in turn we utilize those funds. Instead of it, the bond is Measure U's paying for it, our certificate of participation is paying for it, and also our Fund 40, which is the sale of proceeds from our Christopher Columbus site. That Fund 40 is also financing this, and so that takes some of the burden off Fund 40, and we get to keep that money for future capital projects.
Are there any further questions or comments from trustees? I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Laurel. We look forward to the next presentation.
May revision. Thank you.
So with that, Superintendent, can we vote on item I, B, and C together, or do we need to do them separately?
You can vote together.
Okay. Unless there's a difference in opinion here, I would like to get a motion for the approval of the filing of the positive certification of financial condition and approval of the revision to the working budget to correspond with the projected year totals. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the second interim budget. Is that basically it? Yes.
That's fine.
Okay, is that both of them? Mm-hmm. Okay, then I second, yeah.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion was approved. That was unanimous. The next item on our agenda is item 10A, certificated retirements for the 2022-2023 year. The administration recommends approval of the retirement request for the following and request appropriate resolutions be prepared commending them for their years of service with the district. First is, and I'm going to pronounce the last name wrong, Mary Jo Kabata Arcaris, TK teacher at Garden Village, effective June 10th, 2023. Ms. K has been employed by the district since October 16th of 1987. And then the second is Marilyn Newman, second grade teacher at Garden Village, also effective June 10th of this year. Ms. Newman has been employed with the district since September 2nd of 1986. Mr. Valenti, did you have any comments?
Besides the fact I was just graduating high school when they got to work here. Again, I know we struggle sometimes with staffing. We've heard it tonight a lot, but we also have a lot of people that stay here a long time. And these two folks are just an example of the many people that work with us so long. So I just want to say thank you, good luck in your future endeavors, and thanks for all your help working with us here in the district.
Are there any comments from fellow board members?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. So I think it's actually Akarese. But I wanted to say, like, doing the math just very simply, it's 37 and 36 years in this district. So I just wanted to say a sincere thank you if you're watching. And even if you're not watching, hopefully you feel it. That's an incredibly long time. I haven't been alive that long.
Yes, I agree. And like Mr. Valenti, when I saw those dates, I started thinking about high school. So I really am appreciative as well for their years of service.
If there are no further comments or questions, I actually have a comment. Actually, I know both of these teachers. They both, Miss Newman is actually my daughter's current second grade teacher. And Miss K, sorry, I pronounced your last name wrong, was my daughter's TK teacher. And at the time, this was right before the pandemic, I was actually like a parent I guess, assistant in the classroom. And I came in and I read books for the students, and Ms. K was just so awesome and helpful. And I feel very blessed that my children have been educated by these great leaders, and they're going to be missed. I'm really lucky Ms. Newman was a first grade teacher last year, and then she moved on to second grade. And so I was like, yes, I get her. So, and then when I saw this on the agenda, I was like, oh no, at least I got lucky. And we are very grateful for their years of service, and I'm excited for them to start their new journey into retirement. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I so moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That was unanimous. Motion is approved. We are now moving to item 12A, board policies, administrative regulations, board bylaws updates for first reading. The board will consider updating board policy administrative regulation 3350.3 travel conference guidelines, and board policy administrative regulations 5141 healthcare and emergencies, and board bylaws 9000 role of the board to include provisions for district procedures, practices, and changes. Are there any comments or questions from fellow board trustees? So I have one on the travel and conference guidelines, and apologies for not getting this to you in advance. I realize that there is nothing that really talks about, and I actually took notes on this, so I'll open up my notes, that does not talk about ride sharing or taxi reimbursement. It's very focused on rental cars. And I know it also indicates that you should, if we're going with multiple people, that you should, go together. And for the most part, we do go with multiple people. And so I don't know if rental car, even though we should have that guideline, is the most important to have in our, does that make sense?
I think there is at least part of a sentence in there that says take the most economical passage, which in this case, it suggests that ride sharing might be more economical, although depending on your airport, a taxi might be most economical. So we do reimburse for either, but we do ask that our employees try to select the most economical option, ride share, taxi, or rental car, which I think is the least economical, unless you're traveling, further than 10 miles from the airport.
Correct. So I guess my question, and maybe to the fellow trustees, do we want to be more explicit? Because it does say take the most economical, but it does not indicate specifically ride sharing or taxis or any of that stuff. It really does focus on rentals. And so from a travel standpoint, being that we're in this new day and age, do we want to explicitly say that, or is that necessary?
I take direction from the board. This is a first reading, and we can modify it and bring it back for the second reading.
All right. I may be wrong, but it doesn't mention taxi in there.
I believe it does. I'll have to find it and show it to you, Mr.
If we could read it again, because I looked yesterday and I did not see the word taxi, rideshare, none of that, and so I wanted to. Do you have it on you?
My visual brain tells me it's at the end of a paragraph somewhere.
Well, also, I'm just thinking as far as rental car, that there are times that we might go to local CSBA events that might be somewhere like Sacramento or other regions where it wouldn't make sense to fly, and then going rideshare would be too expensive. So I definitely think that we should still keep rental car in there, and then if we need to, maybe just add the word rideshare.
Yeah, usually all travel and conferences, when done by employees and also by the board, you just don't know. We do fill out travel and conference form projections of what we think the whole event will end up costing, and that's when the decision is made. Oh, we think it'll be, nowadays you can put it in any location, how much it might cost. So that's when those decisions are made at the approval level.
Yeah, and I do agree with keeping the rental car. I just, again, with times changing, I just want to, if it's not explicit in there, I'm a huge, I advocate for us being explicit so there is no confusion when someone asks later on down the line, like, well, so if it's not there, and again, we don't have to use this time. This is the first reading. Superintendent Vidales, I can connect with you offline, and since it is from a board policy standpoint, and me and Trustee Tsujisaka are on that committee, and we're happy to review and give you back some updates to that if need be.
Oh, you know what? It may be in our travel conference guidelines, administrative regulations.
Got it.
That's where I might have seen it, but I'll look at it.
It wasn't in the whatever was sent to us.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, so if you could send that our way, that would be
we'll look at it.
Great. Perfect.
I have another, unless you have a.
I am seeing it under other modes of travel, so you can just check it there. Mention of rideshare as something that can be used when possible in lieu of taxis when this represents a cost savings. But I don't know if it's...
And that's on the website that we download that PDF, or is that because the one that, again, I think the one that we sent us that's I think what we're talking about. The one that he sent
The one
us
that was, is that a part of the packet that was sent? Yes.
So I think there's more pages in that one than the one that we were sent.
So my question is, on the original, there's a specific section in there on travel, and I think it indicates a dollar amount for. Do we need to indicate a dollar amount for ride? Because it indicates a dollar amount for rental cars, I believe. Do we need to explicitly indicate a dollar amount for ride? Like it says, this is the cap, I think, is something.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I mean, like I said, this is all approved before the conference is attended. And so that's all part of the calculation of can it be reimbursed or not. And the conversations are held at that time about, you might want to consider not renting a car for this because that's going to cost X amount. You can take a ride share. Look at this. If you take Lyft, this is how much it's going to cost you. So I don't think the board needs to set an amount for that. I mean, I think it's part of the administrator overseeing that budget that approves that.
And then I could also see if we set a dollar amount with rising costs, and like I know for extreme example, when COVID was happening, when it was impossible to get a rental car in Hawaii, not saying we're going to Hawaii, but if that way they were charging incredible amounts. Like I'm sure any dollar amount we set would be way lower than that. But actually, I had a question about some of the things that were striked out. There were. Is there a reason? And I think I'm just more curious, not more like, I'm just more curious. Why are all the credit card limits striked out? we were striking out a lot of the credit card limits. I'm just wondering what that.
I think the ones that were being struck out are the ones for site credit cards. Sites don't have credit cards. So
Okay.
So, and that was in our policy, but we've made a decision and we've never had a site credit card.
Okay, thank you.
Only
No,
district departments have credit cards.
That answers my question.
That's interesting. I noticed that as well, and I thought you were just maybe taking back some credit cards.
But we've just never issued that. I mean, when I started, we had only one district credit card, and now everything is electronic payment, and so now every department has a credit card. And they're all reviewed on a monthly basis, expenses,
Yes.
and have to be approved by multiple administrators so that no one administrator, like a superintendent, can charge whatever I want.
See, that's why I thought it was
Mr.
removing.
Lauro and Mr. Valenti have to look at my expense reports and
Yeah,
make
so-
sure that they're
Yeah,
appropriate.
we have a lot of public agencies, especially school districts, as you know, have a lot of internal control. So we try to really limit all that, and instead of having things be on credit cards, it goes through our requisition and purchase order process, so that the level of it being approved goes through multiple people.
But in travel, most expenses are credit card.
And I just had another comment that I was surprised to see that we could actually request for more leg room. So it was nice to see that in there because that actually is an issue for me
Yeah,
sometimes.
so that's based on experience and practice that, sometimes some of our employees are flying and they're like, can I get the more legroom? I can't sit in the other ones. And so it's usually a $15, $20 increase. And so we do that. But somebody like me doesn't need the extra legroom. So I don't take that.
Well, I will say that I've been very pleased with the care that Ms. Colbert has put into booking things for us and making sure that we leave at the time that we want to return at the time, if we want an aisle seat or window. So I've been very happy with that. I just was surprised to see that we could request for.
Well, it's added, right? So it's in green because it's a new thing, and we didn't have it in there. And the way that it's written is that you need to ride coach, regardless of who your size. And so we did put in there the extra leg room because that's now an option. It's more prevalent in most airlines that offer that. So we put that in there just because it's becoming more of an option.
Thank you.
Okay, so going back to the travel thing. So I see the other modes, and I do remember seeing this at the end of it. It says airport bus transportation or professional rideshare services should be used whenever possible. I guess my question is, right, it talks about, it talks about parking fees under mileage reimbursement at the hotel. If someone decides to drive to the airport, because that's no longer that's not explicitly stated here because the airport parking is a little bit more expensive. How do we gauge whether that was
again that is done at the front end when the conference is being approved? Say for myself, I know it costs about $40 to get to the airport, and so I know a parking garage next, and if it's gonna, I could get an estimate of how much it would cost for me to park there. So if it's going to cost less than $80, I'll drive my vehicle, park it, and charge it. If it's going to cost more than $80, then I'll take a ride share because that's more economical. So I think that it's an individual decision. I think we and different people, because I go to the airport often, I know how much a ride share costs me to get there, and then I can compare it to what the parking rates are. So.
okay? Just again, I want to make sure that if we're not being explicit, that it's that we all know. Are we supposed to be doing our own, I guess research in advance, making sure that we're
certainly. I mean, this is a policy that's not for just the board. Yeah. This is for all employees, and like all employee conferences are approved by an administrator, and that's the conversation that the employee, and generally initiated by a school administrator or department administrator, say, oh, we have this conference, we want to send 5 people to it, and they make those decisions and they get approved not just by the site administrator, but a district administrator as well.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. I have no further questions. If there's no further questions or comments, then I believe this one is an action. Do we have a motion?
I motion to approve the 3 board policies that we are that we are updating.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. It is approved. Moving on to item 13A, Governance Handbook. The administration recommends the board review and adopt the Jefferson Elementary School District Governance Handbook 2023 updates discussed and developed with the assistance of the CSBA Association Governance Leadership Workshop on January 21st, 2023. Remember that this was on our agenda at the last time, and what was included in our packet was not the updated version. I reviewed, and it is the updated version this time around. So thank you, Ms. Covere. And if there are no further questions or comments on this one, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion is approved unanimously. Now moving to item 15, persons wishing to address the board on unagendized items are closed session items. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issues that is under the board's jurisdiction and not on the agenda or an item addressed in closed session. The maximum time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards today, Ms. Colbert? Perfect. Seeing as we do not, we will be moving to item 16, governance team members' comments, reports, and board meeting reflection. And this time I'm going to start on my right.
Okay. Just very briefly, I appreciate all the presentations. Thanks to Dr. Adams for excellent explanation of the special ed program. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for update on the LCAP, and thank you, Mr. Laro, for presentation on the budget. All very helpful discussion for our understanding, and I think it was a good meeting. Thank you.
My reflection on the meeting is that we did a great job of keeping our interests in the best, keeping our focus on the best interests of our students. Thank you.
All right, so I have a few updates and a few comments. Mr. Hagan, I do not have your glasses this time. I'm sorry. If you recall, he said that the last board meeting. I wanted to also include, thank you, Superintendent Vidales, for answering all the questions that you do. Thank you, Ms. Covere, for taking notes and keeping us on track. And thank you, Mr. Valenti, for sitting there and nodding. Very, very good. First update is from the JESD Housing Governing Board. So we have, we are going to be looking at a reviewed update of, oh my gosh, why am I forgetting what it is? Eligibility criteria. We'll be reviewing that at our next meeting, which is on April 25th. Thank you. So the second thing was Superintendent Vidales and I also attended the San Mateo County board dinner that was happening at Kenyatta College. We had a very good presentation from Campbell School District on, did you recall, what was it? What was the data on?
It was equity and diversity, equity and inclusion practices.
Yeah, and I can share more later if that's desired. And then I also wanted to just point out a shout out to the district for item 10D that we approved. It was, we hired 4 more substitutes, and I'm just very happy to hear that we were getting substitutes at all. So that's all. Thank you.
Oh, yes, I forgot to announce that, there will be a COVID-19 and flu vaccination clinic once again at our second home at the JFK campus, I believe March 22nd from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And there will be flyers that will be sent out, I'm sure, to the district very soon. Yeah, I saw the draft of the flyer.
Awesome. I actually have no comments. I just want to thank everyone for whoever presented today for their presentations. Thanking the fellow trustees for their engagement and questions that allowed us to keep our focus on the best interests of our students, and obviously communicate openly and respectfully to each other. And with that, I would like to convene. Hold on one second. So we're ending this meeting, and I would like to close this out in a moment of silence. Can I do that, or do I have to convene to close session first?
No, you can just close this section of the meeting, the open session, in memory of those individuals.
Perfect. I am going to close the open session in memory of Denise Haley, ELA, ELD, teacher at Ben Franklin Intermediate, Peter T. Sorellas, father of Nola Slattery, a special circumstance instructional assistant at General Pershing's preschool, and Eleanor Nan Scarpino, retired administrative assistant, special education department. And with that, we are going to convene to close session at 9:20.